Good evening. Welcome to yet another live edition of the Green and White podcast, brought to you by Argyle Life. After, thankfully, an away trip where we have something to show for our efforts. A 1-1 draw away at Pride Park against Paul Warren's Derby County, topped off with a Adam Randall free kick responding to a wonderful effort from Jerry Yates early in the first half, sees Argyle finally claim their second point on the road, meaning that our points on the road this year have both been 1-1 draws. Let's get the usual housekeeping out of the way. Do like and subscribe on all the various platforms that you can find us on, situated lovely below Jon this evening, as you can find all the logos of where you can catch us. And do get involved with the show. We are an interactive show, so do get your comments in, such as the now famous Pat Down, who says we are on time. Well, it didn't look like it, because at 7:59 I was the only person in the room, but we did get going. So let's go around clockwise and meet the lads this evening. Sam, come to you first. Are you well? Good day in Derbyshire yesterday?
Yeah, well, we didn't lose and we scored a goal, which makes it much better than most of them. So, yeah, it was pretty good.
It certainly was. And you were joined in Derbyshire by Mr. Allsop, Jon.
Yes, indeed. Had a very nice day out, and as Sam says, it's nice to. It's always fun going to Argyle away, whatever the football throws up, or almost always, I'd say. But getting a result makes it much better. So very much enjoyed my day out.
And I don't actually know, Adam, if you were in Derbyshire. Were you in Derbyshire yesterday?
Okay, I can give you a nice surprise. Yes, I was, and yes, as the other lads have said, it's lovely to have come back from one of these away trips and not been despondent. So coming in and seeing you lads again today, yeah, good times.
Yeah, it is good times. Let's mix it up then, because we normally go straight to Sam Down for the pre-match run through. Let's mix it up a little bit. Bit of Russian roulette. Jon, why don't you take us through the 1-1 draw at Pride Park then? Because as Adam says, we've got something to show for our efforts, haven't we?
Yeah, very much so. So obviously, the context, which every Argyle fan who hasn't been living under a rock will know very well, is that we've had 1 point and 1 goal away from home this season, those both coming in the same game. And apart from that, it has been very slim pickings indeed. And I think against a team like Derby, where, I think respectfully, they're certainly not among the best sides in the league, but they've had a pretty solid start after getting promoted last year, and they're very good at home. What you really want is to go there, keep things tight, show you're competitive, stay in the game. What you don't want to do is concede from a set piece when we know that's their biggest threat, without even 10 minutes on the clock. And of course, that's exactly what we did. And I think it's one of those goals where, I would probably question the defending a little bit. I think that the effort to clear the box is pretty weak, but the finish is just unbelievable from Jerry Yates. And when your fortunes have been, what ours have been away from home, the last thing you want is to see that kind of finish fly into the top corner when 9.9 times out of 10 it would, go over the bar, or he completely miss his kick and land on his coccyx or whatever. You sort of have to put your hands up to some extent and say fair play, but at the same time, it left us with what, not a mountain to climb, in normal team terms, but in Argyle away from home terms, pretty much a mountain to climb. And then they had a big spell of pressure. And I think Sam turned to me and said, we're bottling it against Leeds all over again. Concede goal. We just become very soft. They had a couple of good opportunities to increase the lead, and it could have been game over and good night Vienna, which means nothing to me, by about the 25-minute mark. As it was, though, we gradually came back into the game. And I think unlike other teams away from home, where we just haven't managed to pass through the lines at all, they sort of let Randall in particular and JB a little bit sort of come in behind their midfield or pass balls in through the lines. And it looked like we was dangerous. We weren't creating a ton of actual chances, but we actually looked like we were kind of getting territory. And I guess it's from a moment like that the goal comes just before half-time, winning a kick on the edge of the box. Obviously a huge stroke of luck, massive deflection off Yates, actually, who was involved in pretty much every incident in the game yesterday. And suddenly it's 1-1, and sort of reminded me at that point less of the Leeds game where we went 1-0 down and then folded, and much more of the QPR game where we got our other point and our other goal, which I alluded to earlier, away from home this season, in that we went 1-0 down in that game very early on. We were under the under the cosh for a long time, looked like it could be 2-0. Then we sort of get a goal out of nowhere. And suddenly, it looks like it might be ours for the taking a little bit. And unlike at QPR, we did not have a player stupidly sent off straight after Adam Randall scored. So I think at half time, the atmosphere under the away end was quite positive. I think we felt that it had been maybe not even half chance wise, but we had played our way into it and were not terrible value for the equaliser. And I think, the remarks were made to the effect of, this is ours, for the taking if we want it. And we came out in the second half and we couldn't quite put together the performance that optimism merited, unfortunately. Didn't really create anything in the second half. That being said, I don't think they created a ton either. They certainly had better chances than we did, but none of them, in my opinion, were particularly gilt-edged. I thought at the time Curtis Nelson really should have scored that header, which Grimshaw sort of pouched agonisingly close to the line, but very much the ball was not over the line, so that was okay. But looking at it again, I think Nelson's actually done really well to win that header, and saying he should have steered it either side of Grimshaw rather than just getting his head on it. I think it's a good effort. Obviously, then the other big chance they have is what would I think have been the best goal I've ever seen in the flesh and maybe ever in football from Yates, from inside his own half, spotting Grimshaw not even that far off his line, really. I mean, it's like if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go and look it up, because it's like a raking shot into the top corner, but from like 70 yards. It's not like just a lob or a hit and hope. It's an actual effort. And Grimshaw, I think, does really, really well to save it, even though it didn't look particularly convincing. It's right under the crossbar. It's a complete nightmare to deal with. But after that, I can't say there were there were really any moments where I had heart in mouth. Particularly, Sam turned to me in his usual optimistic way and said, "They're just going to nick this, aren't they? I can feel it in my bones." In the end, we could have nicked it with maybe a better set piece delivery and added time. We did actually get up the pitch a little bit more. So I think on the whole, a mixed day. I feel a bit frustrated that we didn't put our better foot forward in the second half, but sometimes you have to give other teams credit for stopping us from playing, and Derby certainly know how to do that at home. And given their home results this season overall, I don't think you can quibble with a point being a fine result for us, particularly given that we beat Portsmouth. I think 2 points from those two games would have been disappointing, maybe not good enough. 4 points from the two is absolutely fine, and obviously lifts us out of the relegation mire, technically, going into the international break, which is a nice place to be.
Jon sort of alludes there to the back end of last week, and it is actually hard to comprehend that Leeds effort last week was actually in the same 7-day period as the 4 points we've just picked up. Do those two results sort of paper over the cracks that were widened at Ellen Road? Does it sort of make it a little bit more, not obviously for the 1,700 who were at Ellen Road and saw us put in a pretty listless attempt at trying to get out of our own half, but does it sort of lessen the blow a little bit that we got 4 points to show from it, from two games that we were always going to be a little bit more competitive in?
For sure, yeah. And Leeds was an abomination, and I think we're all agreed. Leeds was ultimately one game, and I think after that final whistle at Ellen Road, if you offered any Argyle fan 4 points for the next two games before the international break, I'm sure we'd have all snapped your hand off at that point, and that's what we've got. We used the term papering over the cracks, and I do agree to some extent that we've got away with it as such. Like, Portsmouth was a very close game that could possibly have gone either way, and it was our ultimately quality that shone through. This one, again, there's been some fight there, as Jon's mentioned. The way that we gained territory in midfield with Randall and JB was an improvement. I mean, a clear improvement on what had gone before. And the point, okay, it's still a little fortunate, and the goal is certainly very fortunate. So there does still have to be some improvement. Of course there does. But in isolation, looking at the last 7 days, as I say, I think anybody would have snapped your hand off for 4 points. And that could be an important 4 points in many ways, not only because it's taken us out of the relegation zone. We're going into an international break, which is nice for a fortnight. It's also come against two teams who you think are very, very likely, in Portsmouth especially, to be down there with us as the season comes to a close. We've also taken points off them as well. So a draw yesterday against a Derby side who could well be in relegation trouble if their away form doesn't improve, and we know what that feels like. could be crucial. The fact that we've denied them the 3 points there, we could look back on this as a very good point. And what I'd also just say is that it's important to note, I guess, particularly after what was happening last week, as you say, Joe, 7 days ago, which feels like a bit of a lifetime. We were looking at our squad had been completely depleted, and we were about to find out that Ibrahim Sissoko was out for a couple of months. There was, we were almost being hit from all angles at that point. So even with those bodies out for a lot of that time, to pick up 4 points, which could prove significant, it's hard not to see that as a positive in its own right. Of course, there's still work to do. Of course, the performances need to improve, but they should. We've got Gibson, who, by all accounts, is coming back after the international break. We'll have players, hopefully, coming back soon after that. And we'll have the January transfer window, where, by all accounts, I know we're 45 grand short, but you'd like to think we're going to be able to make a fair few deals in that window to improve us. So there's, I'm not going to get carried away by 4 points, but sitting here last week, if, as I said at the start, if you offer me 4 points, I've absolutely have taken it. We've got that, and it's a decent trait for sure to not play well and still pick up those points. And if we can now start playing well as players come back, we'll look back on this pretty fondly.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. Sam, let's talk about that opening goal, because actually up until that point, my gut feeling was watching it was actually this is possibly the best first 10, 12 minutes we've had on the road all season. We actually looked
quite we were good in the first 10 minutes and then lost 5-0.
Well, yeah, but we looked I actually felt we looked a lot more comfortable and confident on the ball in this game than what I saw at Cardiff. I know Obafemi obviously had that chance in the 10th, 11th minute there in Cardiff, but it sort of then really hurt, didn't it? Not only the technical ability of Jerry Yates to score the overhead kick and how it comes, but after such a bright start, to still find ourselves behind on the road. The demons were well and truly setting in at that point, weren't they?
They were, and yeah, despite the fact that, as Jon and Adam have both alluded to, the performance was no great shakes, to put it mildly. It is a great testament to the character and the mentality that they didn't do what they normally do when we concede away from home and completely go into their shell and collapse and throw away the game like we did at Cardiff, Millwall, and indeed Leeds, where in all three of those games, our best spell of the game was at 0-0.
So Sheffield Wednesday.
Well, yeah, I don't think we ever really got going at Sheffield Wednesday. Certainly, certainly Cardiff, Millwall, and Leeds, we were hardly playing like Barcelona before going 1-0 down, but we were playing a bit better in those games. Sheffield Wednesday, we were just rubbish even before going 1-0 down, really. Yeah, anyway, the point I'm making, I'm getting at is with that we kind of feared the same thing was going to happen again. I know I certainly did, and I think most people did as well. And yes, that 5-10 minutes spell after going 1-0 down, it did look all the more. So that was when Derby had another good little run, and they looked like they might go 2-0 up. But we just gradually wrestled it back. And we were competitive for the rest of the game, without a doubt. Look, I'm not going to suddenly go full 180 and just stand here and say like it was some incredible performance. I still think we didn't really create probably even a half decent chance all game, never mind a good chance, really. There was only obviously the Rooney, the Randall free kick. I've got Rooney on my brain clearly. The Randall free kick, yeah. And what else even was there? There was a Callum Wright shot from the edge of the box. I'm not even sure that would quite be a half chance, more like a quarter of a chance maybe. But yeah, a couple of corners that sort of fell into nice areas, but nobody was on the end of them. So I'm not going to say it was great, but it was certainly 10,000 times better than the slop we were served up after going 1-0 down at Cardiff and at Millwall and at Leeds. We were competitive. We battled well in the tackle. The build-up play was quite good, even if the final ball wasn't. The midfield play was good. Having Randall back in the heart of that midfield made a difference, without a doubt, to how good our build-up play was. And yeah, we were competitive. We didn't just make stupid errors after stupid errors like we so often tend to do. We were disciplined defensively. We kept shape well, and up to the final ball, we were pretty reasonable in our build-up play. So definitely positives to take. Certainly much better than most of the absolute dross we've seen on the road this season. But yeah, still absolutely enormous amounts of work to do. I do think it was quite sloppy defending for the Yates goal, as much as it is a great bit of skill. You know what? when I first saw it, I thought that's Such's fault because him and Pleguezuelo both go for the same man. But then when I watched it back, actually Pleguezuelo completely slips onto the ground and Such has to go and fill that zone. So actually it's Bundu's fault, if anything, for not dropping back and filling the space that Such departs. Because I kind of get why Such has to do that. Because if it falls to that player with Pleguezuelo, prostate on the ground, then it is probably a goal. So I get why Such does go out of his zone, having watched it back, but Bundu doesn't respond to that and doesn't drop back in. I know he's an attacking player, but at set pieces, attacking players do need to defend. So a little bit disappointing that an attacking player sort of was inadvertently given so much defensive responsibility. And if he'd have gone in and got tighter on Yates, then I just don't think that we would have conceded. But that is what it is. And as John alludes to, I think it is worth mentioning that strike from Yates inside his own half is, for all the fact it didn't go in the net, one of the single greatest bits of skill I've ever seen from a player in a game against Plymouth Argyle. And if that had gone in, then I think it would have been one of those very rare instances. Last seen, I think, at Home Park in March 2007, where Argyle fans applauded an opposition goal. That was when Martin Devaney scored a magnificent 40-yard strike for Barnsley into the top corner. And I think that would have been on a par, if not even better than that goal had it gone in. So, to summarise...
I also have form seeing goals scored from the halfway line at Pride Park, because I was in the ground for, and older viewers may remember, Derby 0, Aston Villa 6, when Roy Carroll cleared the ball to Stilian Petrov, who chested it down and lobbed it on the half volley back over his head from about 50 yards out. I don't know if this one would have been better than that. No, I think it would actually. I think it would have been better just because it was inside his own half. Anyway, would have been definitely like lightning striking twice for me personally if that one had gone in.
To quickly wrap up and summarise, much better mentality, much better defensive, much better build-up play. Chance creation still needs a lot of work, and that's going to be the main focus area, I think, in terms of how we open these games up. But we'll see. Certainly, it was nice just to not go home fuming and seething for the first hour or two of the trip back. So that's a bonus at least.
For the first hour or two, why? What happens after the first hour or two? Do we miss something on the journey back? Or
no, we normally just cheer up at that point and then stop bothering about it. But it was good to go straight to the point of being cheerful rather than have to get through the brief spell of misery first.
That you've done quite well there, Sam, because I actually came to you to get your opinion on Jerry Yates's goal, so you eventually got there. But we also got your post-match thoughts, which is good. Does anyone else want to chip in on Jerry Yates's goal very quickly as to whether or not we should be actually looking at it as it's just one of the goals of the season already? Fair play for the skill, or do we actually really have to forensically analyse? Could Callum Wright have left it to Such to head away rather than him going for it himself when the second ball comes in? Do we really have to forensically go through it?
Do you mean Such could have left it to Callum Wright, or because it was?
No, Such? Callum Wright's the one who wins the contact.
Right. Okay, but it would Such. Callum Wright can't do a lot about it. Such then. Yeah, I know. I get what you're saying. I don't think there's any problem with Such going in like that. In answer to your question, I just think that Bundu said got to drop in and fill it better. And for all we can say, sometimes sometimes a goal is just good. Sometimes a goal is just good. But even some of the best goals in history can be analysed. Even Zlatan Ibrahimovic's famous goal for Sweden against England wouldn't have happened if Joe Hart wasn't so far off his line. So, despite all of that, if Bundu reacts a bit better and sort of gets in the way of Jerry Yates, there's no way he has that unguarded path to the goal. So I don't have a problem with Such coming out for it, but I don't have a problem with what Such or Callum Wright did. But when you're playing a zonal marking system, somebody has to fill that zone that he's vacated, which Bundu did not do.
You two lads want to chime in before we move on?
I just would make a broader point, which is we just don't look comfortable defending our own box from those sorts of situations. This is quite a few games in a row now where we either don't win the first contact or we do, but it's just sort of wishy-washy up rather than out header. Or, we lose the first contact like yesterday and then the second one. I understand, it's not massively easy to get a bunch of kind of distance and clearance on a looping ball when you're sort of trying to jump. I don't want to be too harsh on Callum Wright individually, because I think it is like a hard header to clear out. But there's just something about the whole where we just don't look convincing defending that type of opportunity. And I wonder if it's because we're not a particularly big team. I mean, yesterday in particular, Such, who is not small by any means, but he's not big, is he? He's not kind of a big centre back like you find at this level. Pleguezuelo is obviously not in any way a big centre back. He's the sort of Lisandro Martinez of the Argyle back line, if you will. I thought they both had really, really good games yesterday, but when those players don't necessarily have a great deal of height, I guess you're sort of relying on other players to come back and help kind of clear the box. Obviously, Bundu didn't do that. I don't think he ever really looks convincing in a defensive posture. We just don't really have sort of like big bodies in the team at the moment. And obviously Gibson, when he comes back, is someone who is a bit more physical and maybe can kind of help us, organise that defensive set piece situation a bit more, add some more structure, add some more physicality. But if I was an opposition manager or set piece coach, I would be looking at those dead ball situations as a very, very inviting opportunity to score against us at the moment. In particular, we just really look a soft touch defending our box from those sorts of balls in. And to be fair, Derby put some balls in the second half that we defended very well. It's not every single time, but if we lose the first header, then you always start to worry about will we actually manage to get the ball clear. And I think we didn't do that for their goal yesterday. And it's one of a number of occasions recently where that's been the case. And it is a bit of a concern, I would say.
I think that's it as well, because it's almost the perfect storm of Derby being one of the best set-piece teams, if not the best set-piece team, at least in my opinion, in the league, and Argyle looking one of the worst, particularly without Gibson. I think it creates that, they're going to create chances. And as Jon said, if there's a set-piece coach at Derby looking at our team, he's probably licking his lips all week at the opportunity to face this defensive line who struggle a lot in those areas, and we've seen it on many occasions. The goal is obviously excellent, and I think take nothing away. If anything, the thing that annoyed me the most at the time, and maybe it was, shall we say, a little bit of a knee jerk as a goal goes in, but I mean, far from us to be knee jerk, right? But I was really annoyed at the fact we actually gave away the corner in the first place. It looked as though if Pleguezuelo wanted to put it out for a throw, he could have done. There was another cheap corner soon after that, and I'm thinking, well, if you're facing the best set piece team in the league, and you should at least be working on the set piece defending in the week. One thing you should also have in the forefront of your mind is don't give them cheap corners. It's kind of the opposite of what Boaz Myhill did against Stoke all those years ago. It's like, well, I know I don't have to, I'm not allowed to give a throw in away, so I'll put it out for a corner. If we could do the opposite, that would have been great. That annoyed me the most. And at one point it looked like they were going to score set pieces against us time and time again. And it is testament to us that was the only huge chance, if you can even describe it as that they got from a set piece all game. And of course, they've put it away, and Yates has done incredibly well, and fair play to him. So it's testament to our defending that we did manage to blunt that for the rest of the game. But at the time, I was just a bit annoyed that we'd walked straight into exactly what they wanted, and that you can analyse the defending on the set piece as we absolutely have and should. I think just not giving it in the way in the first place would have been helpful. Yeah,
I think actually it's one of the things that stood out for me about Paul Warne's time at Rotherham was just how effective they were at set pieces as well. And I don't want to coin Paul Warne as just a very set piece orientated manager, but his teams historically, from what I can remember off the top of my head, have often been threats at set pieces. He likes those tall, physical players. I actually said to you guys in a text, didn't I? The front three of Mendes, Lang, Caden Jackson, and Jerry Yates were sending my mind into a spiral before kickoff yesterday as to how we were going to deal with them. But while we're on the subject of set pieces, we scored from one ourselves. In step Simon Hooper with perhaps the softest free kick that was given in the Football League this weekend. That led to Adam Randall popping one in from miles out. We won't talk about the fact that it's taken a 30, 35, 40 degree deflection off the head of Jerry Yates, but it's nice that we're equally competitive. And actually, if you look at it from a different angle, Jon, the keeper would have done well himself to get there. Randall was putting that in as far away from the keeper as he possibly could when you see that angle from behind the goal.
Yeah, I think it's bending in a little bit too much for it to go in if it doesn't get the deflection, unless the keeper is unsighted or has an absolute nightmare getting across and flapping it into his own net or whatever. Like, I think if you look at where it looks to be going, the keeper looked pretty well placed to come across and make a save. But he would have been required to make a save. I don't think it would have been a straightforward catch or anything like that. I think he would have probably had to palm it out and away, possibly tip it around the post. It's a good strike. It's a good pacey free kick. So yeah, obviously, it is a big stroke of luck that it's taken that big deflection, and that deflection has just so happened to flash into the top corner. But I think it's a case of sort of making your own luck a little bit. I watched Randall's comments after the game to Argyle TV, and he basically said, I've had, it is lucky, but I've also had a few free kicks that have just clipped off the wall and gone just over the bar or gone just wide, and if you sort of play the percentages of trying to get the ball just over the wall, you're either banking on that going over and the keeper being unsighted, and you've got the kind of correct arc and whip on it for it to go straight in, which we've seen him do before, or you are kind of gambling on that deflection. I guess it's a bit like in tennis when you're playing low balls over the net, right? There's a chance the ball will go into the net. There's a good, but if you get the shot right, it just goes, it either clips the net cord and unsettles the opponent, or wrong foots them, I should say, or it's a whippy kind of pacey low ball that's hard to defend against. I think something like the same principle applies here. So I don't think it's one where we should just throw up our hands and say pure luck. We didn't deserve it whatsoever. Our players done nothing right. It's a freak goal. It's the sort of thing where I think if you put yourself in that situation, you back yourself and you strike it with that quality, that consistently, which Randall really does. At one point, one of those the percentage will pay off, and you'll get the little flick, or it will just go in the top corner of its own accord. That being said, obviously there is an element of luck to it, of course. But I think Randall deserves credit as well. I think it's a really good, well-struck free kick, and yeah, it seemed to mean a lot to him as well. Great celebration over by the away.
Just to quickly expand on that, I feel that there is, just very quickly, a value in just hitting the ball really, really hard, which he does. Because ultimately, if you
as Paul Watson and the reputation he developed by doing just that.
Exactly. If he doesn't get as much power behind it, it probably just deflects tamely and the keeper has enough time to respond. Because there is so much speed and so much power on the initial shot, that makes it then very hard for the keeper to respond. He's wrong-footed. And ultimately, you know what? It's tough to, it'd be great if in cricket, you had you had ball tracking where you could see where the ball was going to go before the movement. But I honestly think there's a good chance it's going in the corner, because it's clearly going to the other corner, and I think he's maybe going to get just enough bend in it to bend back in. Maybe it bends too far and it's easy for the keeper. But again, even then it comes to the point there's still a great deal of strength behind it, and a great deal of strength behind it can make it quick for the keeper, make it tough for the keeper to respond even without the deflection. So ultimately, when it's a numbers game, yes, the numbers have fallen a bit lucky in our favour here, but when you hit it regularly with as much strength and as much power as he does, even if he doesn't score directly, stuff happens like it being, or even if like what happened for the Preston game, where the keeper does save it, but it can only push it back out, and then one of our players can come in. When you ultimately hit it with enough strength as he does, it's no coincidence that it results in goals, even if not direct goals.
It's you've sort of ruined my point there, Sam, that I was going to make before you interjected. That John's talking about the bad luck that Randall referenced in his post-match interview on Argyle TV. If you cast your mind back to the Preston game, Freddie Woodman's practically had to claw that from almost behind the line to keep it out of his net. He said it was such power. It was a really good save, and there was nothing more he can do. So perhaps that under Wayne Rooney's coaching, and Wayne was obviously a very good set piece taker himself, that maybe he's developing Adam Randall into a real threat if we do get into those positions. And we all remember the show reels of Ibrahim Sissoko before he came in, the amount of free kicks he would pick up in and around the box just with his trickery. So perhaps that's a tool in our armory. Second half, Adam, just very quickly, because as John alluded to, there wasn't a huge amount really to talk about in the second half, bar that Jerry Yates long range effort. One thing that was noticeable though was how stretched and erratic the second half became. And if you cast your mind back 12 months to Stephen Schumacher's Plymouth Argyle side in the Championship, when the game got stretched and erratic, that was often when we were at our best, and managers would always say we didn't want it to become like that because that's where Plymouth show their strength. Actually, yesterday when it became stretched and erratic, I actually thought that was when we were at our worst and we weren't keeping possession and we were turning it over far too easily.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And I think it was testament when that game got stretched to just how we were watching two sides who are, let's say, very poor at creating chances from open play. I think we saw with Derby, we knew that the majority of their threat, if you like, was going to come from set pieces, and with us, well, as it turned out, it was the same. But we know that we struggle a lot to create chances away from home. And it kind of proves. So when the game was stretched, I mean, yeah, sure, it's something that got the crowd up and got us all interested. But as you say, I didn't think we looked great at that point. But at the same time, neither side then has created a particularly decent chance. I mean, I think, John, you referenced I think it was you, John. I might be putting Sam's words in your mouth. Please forgive me. But I think that it was the Nelson header that's probably their best opportunity, and even that is a half chance at best, considering the work he has to do to get to the header. And for us, it's well, our best chance of the half is probably Callum Wright's tamely deflected shot. So there's it wasn't an exciting half. I think we'll say that it was a stretched game, and that's the sort of thing where you, as I say, got the crowd up. You got the feeling that we could nick this. We could get that one opportunity based on the fact that it's a little bit end to end. It's a little bit a bit more space than than we had in the first half for sure. It obviously didn't happen. And I think for me that I liked the way both teams used their substitution. I think they both did well. I think the only mistake that Derby made was bringing off Mendes Lang when he looked a threat. I think that was a misstep on their part. But I think the way they changed shape to get Ben Osborne out on the left, it just gave us something to think about at that point. And I think their change of shape almost helped stretch the game more than anything else, with the way that they were getting that space. We then suddenly had the issues with you kind of had Wright, Sorinola, and to a lesser extent Whittaker there, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we had a plan of how to deal with it initially. We knew exactly where we needed to be, and now they've almost got an extra body there, and that I think was the period we were most overrun at that point, because it was difficult to deal with. And I think it's to Rooney's credit as well that from that point on, I think he recognised, okay, this isn't working at this point, and we had a few subs at the same time, but the one that struck with me was Michael Obafemi going off for Adam Forshaw there. It's not a straight swap by any means. It's one of those where, okay, Forshaw's got his faults, and we saw that at QPR, but it shored up the midfield a lot more at that point to give us the extra body, as it were, to ensure that we could deal with that threat. And from that point, it kind of cancelled each other out. So it's one of those where I think we all kind of felt that. And I think everybody, the Derby fans included, felt that, oh, there's another chance in this. Somebody's going to have that big opportunity to nick it, because the game is starting to get stretched. And both managers then started to cancel each other out. Mendes Lang went off, and at that stage, it's well, the feeling is both sides almost feel like they're settling for this at this point. So it kind of went completely the other way. So yeah, it wasn't the most exciting half in the world. There's not much really that we're going to be talking about for a long time. And of course, if the Yates goal goes in, it's completely different, and we're talking about that, I think, for many years. But it is what it is. And there was, I mean, aside from a few threats, and I think both sides, it was set pieces that gave that threat. And really, at the end, it was us on the front foot, and I was just a little bit disappointed with those final set pieces. If you're gonna pack the goalkeeper, have I nicked your point, Joe? I'm so sorry. Well,
Unbelievable.
it's the only threat we had. It had to come up eventually. Yeah, if you're gonna pack the goalkeeper there, you can't really play it to the front post and have the first man head away. I think that was disappointing, but.
Also,
I'll let you expand, Joe, because you have stronger views on this than I'm sure.
Well, I was just going to say it was literally about to come up in conversation in the next 30 seconds. But John, do you want to quickly jump in before I just make a quick point on that?
I was just going to say also, like, for that one right at the death, I think we should have put a few more bodies in the box. I think we left too many people sort of outside the box. It just felt a bit hedgy. that game was not going to, that game was not going to continue past the delivery of that corner, basically. That was it. It was very much like, it wasn't quite the last kick of the game because I guess the ref allowed the ball to be sort of headed back into the box. I really don't think if Derby had broken on us that they would have had enough time to do it. So I do understand a point, as I said earlier, is a good result. I do understand settling for that a little bit, but I think if you've got a chance to just put one or two more bodies in the box and go for all three. Yes, in the end it didn't matter hugely because the delivery was not excellent, but I felt like maybe a better delivery and a couple more bodies in the box we could have. Maybe I would have had a little bit more hope about nicking it. As it was, when I saw how many bodies we were lining up outside the box, and also the fact we're not very good at corners generally, I can't say that I was particularly optimistic that we would be scoring from it. But that is, again, we've talked about defensive set pieces. Attacking set pieces is another weakness for us, and I think that has been a long-term problem. It's not a Rooney thing. They were not great last season either, with a couple of exceptions. And it's an important area of the game, and I just hope we can maybe do a bit more work on that at some point. Yeah. But obviously, it's something that is not working with the way we're doing it currently.
I think that the broader point about at the end of the game, and you are right, Adam, to highlight. I highlighted to you guys, didn't I, in our group chat about the substitution of Mendes Lang. Christ, he's an awkward player to play against, isn't he? He has been for a number of years now. But you're right to highlight that moment at the end. And John's talking about the corner. I think the frustrating thing for me is in just 4 minutes of stoppage time, we had a free kick and a corner. It wasn't just we had one set piece with a corner. We also had the free kick where JB does brilliantly well. When we sort of countered a little bit and he had to hold it up when there wasn't a ball on, and he drew the foul. I think it's a little bit frustrating that not once but twice. I don't think we won the first contact on either, and it actually came back to us is how we won the corner. Sam, let's come to you because I was going to come to you about the set pieces at the end, but Adam obviously has access to my running order, so we'll just quickly skip it on a point. We'll just try and keep this as brief as we can because I've got 8 starred things that I want to show you guys so far. So do keep the questions and comments coming in. Nearly 500 of you watching, and we're almost at 40 minutes as well. So do get sharing the live stream around. Sam, I'll give you one of these players. I'll come to Adam about the other in a second. Why don't you talk to me about, and neither of them are really my cup of tea, but why don't you take, actually I'll let you decide. Would you like to talk about Julio Pleguezuelo's week, or would you like to talk about Matty Sorinola's week? Because I think the fact that neither of them have played many minutes at all this year, to come in when asked to play in 3 really tough games for different reasons, I think they've both come out of it with immense credit.
I'll touch on Pleguezuelo. I think, not a player who I think I've ever raved about. I think in that early phase at the start of last season, when the Green Army were getting incredibly excited about him, I wasn't really quite seeing it to the same level. So I'm not somebody who's got a great deal of bias towards him at all, really. But I do think he's done okay since coming back in. I think first half of the Portsmouth game, he was quite wobbly, but really grew into it in the second half and was mostly pretty solid through the game yesterday. It was an unfortunate slip for the goal, having looked at it, and I didn't really notice at the time that how much he slipped, but something like that, it's not a major structural failing. It's not like he's just, not stuck to a player all game when it's switched off too often. It's just one unfortunate moment. Now, sadly, that unfortunate moment led to a goal, which, 9 times out of 10 it wouldn't, because 9 times out of 10, either A, Bundor suits cover it, or B, he just doesn't score, because even unmarked is a very difficult chance to score. So, he has one slip, which 9 times out of 10 doesn't lead to a goal. Yesterday did lead to a goal, but that notwithstanding, he did have a good game for sure. He got in the way of everything. He cleared the ball well. And ultimately, as Adam alluded to, Derby also barely created any chance. And it was just quite a dull game, really. But then, maybe, you've got to give some credit to our defender, because Derby not creating chances. Yes, it's maybe down to a little bit of lack of creativity by Derby, but it was also down to good defending from us. So Pleguezuelo did well in that regard. He stuck to his man very well. He won a bit in the air, which he doesn't often do, because he's not the most comfortable in the air. He's not the biggest or tallest for a defender. I think he's given Wayne Rooney something to think about, because Lewis Gibson is coming back soon. I think Gibson will come back into the team without a doubt, but with Such, whilst he's been all right this season, I don't think he's anywhere near as good as Gibson. If Such would have a bit of a dip in form, maybe it strengthens the case for Pleguezuelo to come back in, or maybe even for away games with our perils on the road, could look at a back three: Pleguezuelo, Such, and Gibson, maybe. He certainly has played himself into contention with a solid performance yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. John, I've got one saved up for you, so don't worry. But Adam, Matty Sorinola, I think this one's even more impressive because Pleguezuelo's had minutes at various points this season, albeit sporadically. Sorinola really hasn't. And to get through 190 minutes is impressive. To get through 390 minutes, pretty much, is really quite extraordinary for him, isn't it? And actually, yesterday, I thought, again, you guys know my views on these two players in particular, but actually, yesterday, I thought was arguably one of his better games in an Argyle shirt.
I think so, and I don't necessarily think it's saying much, considering he hasn't had a great deal. But I do agree with that. I mean, for me, well, first of all, I was gutted when Sam decided to talk about Pleguezuelo with Sorinola, because I was all lined up to say I thought Pleguezuelo was our best player. I thought he's really come into his own, and okay, admittedly, it's been against two of the least creative teams in the league, but he's not looked out of place at all. So yes, certainly something to think about when Gibson comes back. For Sorinola, yeah, again, with the same caveat that I've just had about Derby and Portsmouth not creating a great deal, he's come in and he's not looked out of place at all. And the viewers of this podcast will know my thoughts on Victor Palsson, but he's never been a right back. And the fact that he was preferred at right back for some of these occasions to Sorinola confused me a bit earlier in the season. I think against Millwall was an obvious example. Or was it Millwall? It wasn't Millwall. I've told a lie. Against Burnley was the obvious example, where Palsson started in the right back position and Sorinola was available, and it just felt completely natural that you'd pick Sorinola for that position because he offers us so much more. And particularly now with Edwards out, he's probably our best option for that position. I wouldn't necessarily rule out a few different systems. Sam has mentioned playing three at the back with the three centre backs as an option. I think if you do want to drop, or shall we say rest Sorinola, based on the fact that there's a lot of miles in those legs over the last week or so, you've got the option of actually playing Such right back or Pleguezuelo right back, and it's interchangeable with those two, and the other at centre. But I thought Sorinola, yeah, he impressed me. I think that there was one moment, I think, in the second half where I think he's tried to shield the ball out of play, not quite managed it, and his adversary has got the better of him and got the ball into the area as a result. That was his one moment of disappointment. But that's nitpicking. If you're looking for moments like that, you'll find them for any player. But in the main, if you're looking at the full 90 minutes that he played, he's done more than enough to keep his place, particularly in games where you feel like we should be on the front foot, because I think he's the most likely of all our options. I probably even include Edwards in this. Edwards is much more of the sort of player who you think is going to pop up at the back post and finish it. Sorinola is the sort of player that I think is more likely to overlap Woods and get the cross in rather than the eventual finish. So with Edwards out, it's always felt like a no-brainer to me that Sorinola would be the natural heir to that position, even though he hasn't been preferred for a few games. So I'm glad he has now. And yeah, one or two moments aside, I think he's done well, and he's going to be pleased for sure. He's going to be very tired, but he's going to be pleased.
He certainly is going to be very tired. John, let's play a little game. This is probably the easiest game that will ever be played on the Green and White podcast, brought to you by Argyle Life. I'm going to quote you, Wayne Rooney. He's Plymouth Argyle's future captain. I think he's got the right temperament and the right mindset. He's a local lad, which is important as well. Everything he's got is, where is it? Everything he's got, a player, is what I like. So, of course, in my opinion, he's a future captain of the club. Who's he talking about?
Joe Hatch. No.
Just give us 2-3 minutes on, because Aaron's not here, so somebody else is going to have to do it. Just give us 2-3 minutes of spiel on Adam Randall, and you reference those celebrations. That meant a huge amount to him yesterday.
Yeah, I wanted to say first, I agree with what Sam and Adam said about Pleguezuelo and Sorinola. I thought they both had good games. I actually just wanted to quibble with Sam a little bit. I think Sam underrates Cornell Such, who I think has been a revelation since coming in from a much weaker league. I think he is only going to improve. Sam, for some reason, seems very down on him a lot of the time. I think he's an excellent player, really,
which is so out of character. It's so out of character for Sam as well.
But I wanted to say I thought he was excellent yesterday as well on the whole. Him and Pleggy both did very well. So I don't want to. I think it's a little bit uncharitable to say that Pleggy gave Rooney a decision to make in terms of should he start instead of Such. I think it would very clearly be Gibson and Such for me, as well as I think Pleggy did. That being said, I gave my man of the match award to Adam Randall, which segues nicely into what you asked me to talk about. I just thought I've waxed lyrical about him on this podcast many times. I think I said a few weeks ago that I was so excited by him this season in particular. When he was playing particularly in that sort of single pivot, which is just a huge amount of responsibility to go onto young shoulders in particular. That is really the key position in our team. I think I mentioned that when he plays poorly, we tend to not create a lot or play poorly. When he plays well, we tend to play well. Yesterday was not a spectacular performance. I have to say I disagree with some of the comments, crawling along the bottom of the screen, that we were absolutely horrendous yesterday. I really don't think that's the case at all. And I think Randall, had a lot to do with what was good about us. It wasn't a flawless performance. He gave the ball away on a couple of occasions, but he's so brave for a man of his age in particular, and certainly, for someone who's not played at a higher level. This really is the highest level that he's played at. And, especially also coming back in after an injury, you could have seen him maybe pulling out of tackles a little bit. But no, he was fully committed, used the ball most of the time really, really well. And I think he just sort of reorients our whole midfield orientation, forwards rather than backwards when he plays. I think if we had him fit against Portsmouth, he would have made a huge difference, because rather than being sort of penned in by their press and sort of passing into their press and failing to get around it, I think he would have just popped us out the other side of it on enough occasions to really cause them problems. And, they would have had to sort of reevaluate. And I think that was the case yesterday. There was one moment in particular I remember where he sort of pinged the ball over the top, a kind of half volleyed pass, which I think we won a corner from. I think it was Obafemi sort of chasing it. It wasn't, great opportunity to put the ball in the box. Obafemi ultimately did well to sort of get it deflected behind off a defender. But it was that sort of ball, sort of opportunistic first-time pass, just getting us forwards. And I think he's so important at that. Obviously, he got his goal. We've discussed that at length. As you say, it meant a lot to him with the knee slide celebration. He's just growing into what is not just a sort of important area of the pitch positionally, but he's growing into a kind of leadership role, a more senior role. It's a joy to behold happening in real time. And yeah, I agree with Rooney's comments, and I certainly hope that he will be with us for long enough to win the captaincy on a permanent basis, because that would be great. Obviously, I dislike people talking about Joe Edwards as if he belongs in a retirement home or should become first team coach next season. The guy's a lot younger and still fit and hungrier than a lot of people seem to think, even though they say they love him generally. But yeah, I hope when Edwards eventually moves on that Randall is still around and able to step into that captaincy role. He is, well, a club legend in the making, certainly, if not one already. And yeah, it's great to see him make these leaps and bounce forward.
It's nice to be in a position where we have a natural successor to the position that one day will need to be filled, but let's hope it's still at least 18 months down the line, maybe even more. That's pretty much it, player wise and game wise yesterday. Sam, just very quickly, and I emphasize the word very quickly because we still got comments to come through. We've just finished that block of fixtures: 6 games, 1 win, 2 defeats, 2 draws, 3 defeats. Obviously previous to that was played 5, won 3, lost 2, and lost those 2 1-0. This block of games just feels different. However, we are on exactly the same points at this stage of the season compared to last, and we have only conceded 1 more goal this season than last. I know we've obviously scored considerably less, but that's obviously outweighed by the 6 against Norwich, etc. Just put into context that little block of fixtures, that's 6 games. That's really what I want you to focus on for the next couple of minutes, if you can.
Yeah, very much not what we hoped for, to get only 5 points from those 6 games, considering we got 9 from the previous 5 against, in theory, much tougher opponents. We would have hoped for more than 5 from 6, without a shadow of a doubt. That being said, we are still over a point a game, which is kind of where we want to be for survival. We are 18th in the league. So, yeah, you have to say we are still finding a way to get results. And I think, to be honest, we're probably, based on how we played in that little spell, we're probably lucky to get as many as 5 points, if I'm brutally honest. I think Pompey could easily have been a draw. Derby could easily have been a loss. Preston was, couldn't. I mean, we probably did deserve a draw in the end, just on chances created. We were dreadful for 80 minutes of that game. So, we were really lucky to get as many points as we did, if I'm honest. But we are going to need to play better. But that being said, we are finding a way to get results. I know, I'm sorry, Joe, I am deviating. I think this is an important point. When a team is getting results but not having the performances to match this, it basically is going to be one of 3 things. Number 1 is that the performances do improve and the results are clearly sustainable. Number 2 is that the performances don't improve and the results then drop off a cliff and inevitably follow the performance. And number 3 is that the performances don't improve, but we still keep finding ways to win. And we are just that gritty, gnarly side who are the data defiers, as George Elliott would probably say, data busters, whatever word he would use. And we're just a team who managed to get results without the underlying numbers being good. And let me be clear, I know that everyone's not keen on stats, XG isn't everyone's cup of tea. Those teams are rare. Those teams are rare who bust the data. That's not that they don't exist, but they are rare. So for me, this is the crossroads. So far, if you're going doing like a October half term or November report card or whatever, I think we're on a C or a C minus, if I'm truthful. I think we are, in terms of points of position, we're doing absolutely fine.
Would you not have taken that at the start of the season, though, to get through to the international break in November, B18, C minus on the report card? I'd be quite content with that, mate.
Sure. And again, I'm not saying we're doing terribly, but for me now, it is at the point where I think we are going to have to improve the way we're playing. And if we don't, then it's going to become very clear we're either one of these data busting teams who get results despite not playing well, or we will inevitably, drop off a cliff unless we start to play a lot better. So what I'm saying is, this is it now. This is the crossroads. We are doing okay. We're doing absolutely fine, really, in a probably a budget sense. The rumours are that we have maybe a little bit of a better budget than last season, but still probably no better than maybe 20th, 21st best budget in the league. So we are.
It's £45,000 lighter now, but carry on.
Yeah, very, very good. We are still either performing to par or maybe even overperforming. So in that regard, yeah, Rooney's doing great. Why is everyone moaning? But there is still that nagging voice in my mind saying that if we don't massively improve the way we're playing, results are going to stop coming. Or maybe we will just keep finding ways to win. So that was a bit of a preamble. I don't know quite where I'm going with it, but I think this is the crossroads now. This is it. This is where we're going to have to either start bucking it up and raising the standards, or we'll be faced with a bit of a reckoning. And I think that's how the next game is going to go, because I do think that now maybe we will. Maybe it'll either be one of the 2 positive scenarios. Maybe it'll either we lift our performance back up to how well we were playing in that little spell, Sunderland, West Brom, Luton, Blackburn. Maybe we'll lift it back up to that level. If we don't, maybe the other optimistic scenario will occur, that we don't play much better, but we just find ways to, indefatigably get wins. Or the third scenario, which is a very bad one, which is where we drop off a cliff. So we'll see. This is okay, but this is the crossroads, so we'll see how it goes.
Is it purely? Are we just again? I don't want to make this into a big point, because we do still have obviously questions and that to come to. Is it purely that we're looking at the fact that we're on the same points and only one more goal conceded and things? Are we just looking at it purely on the fact that we have been beaten 4-0 at Sheffield Wednesday, we have been beaten 5-0 at Cardiff, we have been beaten 3-0 without laying a glove on Leeds? Is it purely down to that? Because obviously last season we hadn't really, other than Swansea at home, we hadn't really taken a hiding up to this point. Is that what we're sort of basing it on?
well, to be fair, even Swansea at home, we were only 2-1 down going into stoppage time, weren't we? But yeah, no, it doesn't help. It doesn't help that we've had these heavy defeats and games where we just look like we've not been on the training field all week. That definitely cannot help. But even then, I still think it's not even just those games. It's games like the Millwall and Burnley 1-0 loss, where even though it was only 1-0, we just didn't really get close to doing anything all game, and that was a Burnley side who, for all their lofty league position, but were very poor on that day, and we could barely lay a glove on them either. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't help that we've had these thrashings, but I also feel that just on a general level, our performance level isn't as good as last season. Yes, you could say, well, football's about results, not performance. And if we keep getting the same results, who cares? And to an extent, maybe, but it's whether we then continue getting the same results, or it's whether then our slightly subpar performances start to catch up with us. Which is why I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm saying we're at a crossroads, and the game's coming up. Just to quickly before I pass on to someone else, I know I've gone on a bit at this point. The fixtures we have coming up are interesting. It's not on paper a massively hard run, but it's not on paper a massively easy run. We've got Watford, who are mixed away from home. We've got Norwich, who are normally very good at home, but are on a really bad run in general.
And I've probably got the best manager in the Championship.
Very good. And I've had their first home defeat in a year now. Then we've got Bristol City, who are on good form, but they're the most up and down team in the league. They have really weird results. They lose games you don't expect them to, and they win games you don't expect them to, or whatever I'm trying to say. And then we have Oxford home, which on paper is the easiest game we've had in a while because they're very poor away, but who knows? And then we have Swansea, who don't score a lot, but also don't concede a lot. So it's all games that are hit and miss games. It's not an easy run, but it's not a hard run. We could so viably come out of that run of 5 games with 10 points and be over the hills and far away from the drop zone toward mid-table. But we could so easily come out of it with 2 or 3 points and be getting cut adrift to Pompey and QPR. So this is it now. This is the run. Let's do it. Let's improve.
John, I'll give you literally about 2 minutes before we crack on.
So I agree with the latter point. I do think it's a sort of crossroads. I do feel that this particular run coming up for all of the sort of individual fixture by fixture reasons that Sam has enumerated is going to be really telling and important. I don't accept this idea that we're sort of data busters or that we've been lucky this season. Like, I think we deserve to have about the number of points that we have. I think if you look at the 4 games that we won, we absolutely deserve to win 3 of those games by all accounts. The other one against Portsmouth, I think, is honestly a game where people over-egged how bad we were. Were we good? No. Were Portsmouth good? Not particularly. As you said, it's a game that can go either way. I don't think that winning a game that could go either way has to be chalked up as this massively lucky kind of XG-defying result. We didn't create a lot. Portsmouth didn't create a lot. Ultimately, we had one moment of quality, which won the game. I think it's a completely legitimate way to win a football match. So, that's 3 out of 4 wins where I think we indisputably deserved it, and 1 where I think it's not like a daylight robbery kind of game. And then you come on to the draws, which you have Hull at home, where in my opinion we deserve to win the game. Sam doesn't agree, I know that, but I don't think Sam would say we deserve to lose that game. It was
I'm with you on that, John. I thought we were the better team.
Yeah, at most that's a 1-1. QPR away, where the XG looks like we got hammered, but we had 10 men and then 9 men for the last couple of minutes. And I think we were very spirited. And by the way, should have had a penalty in the last 5 minutes there, which would potentially have won us the game. So arguably that's bad luck. And then you have Preston, where we're a bit lucky in the sense that we were really poor, but we did concede 3 goals. I mean, that's about what you would expect from a poor home performance, right? It wasn't like we were shocking and then we conceded once and then scored a goal that's gone in off someone's arse in injury time. It's an incredible attacking, peppy fight back. And then yesterday, I've seen this Derby fan in the comments, and best of luck to him. I think he was a different game to me and seemingly everyone who's interacting with him, because I do not think that we were, poor yesterday. I don't think Derby were particularly better than us. Could we have lost? Yeah. Did we deserve to lose? I mean, maybe, but not. Again, it was a game that could have gone either way, and I think a draw is about right. So I think it's about right that we've got the points we have. You then look at the fixtures where we've lost, and I think it's the inverse of the point I've just made. I think there's a couple of those games where you could maybe make a case that we deserved more than we got. West Brom away, for example, I thought we played really well and were maybe unlucky not to get a point. But then the other games we deserved to lose, by and large, right? Deserved to lose at Sheffield Wednesday, deserved to lose at Cardiff, deserved to lose at Leeds. And I think there's a negativity that's sort of getting spun onto these results because we've been so shocking in the games that we've lost, because we've conceded so many goals in some of those individual games. But as far as I see it, I think the plan, obviously the plan isn't to get beaten 5-0, but I think like what is kind of an okay outcome for us is we'll play a certain way. It will be very open at the back. There'll be games where we get absolutely tonked. But then the flip side of it is we'll play really well at home and we'll score 4, the other team will score 3. And as long as that evens out at being about where we are in the table right now, I will have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. I think we're about where we deserve to be. I think you also need to look at the table dynamically, right? Like, it's not just us in isolation. Look at all the other teams around us. Our results at times this season don't feel like it's been a particularly good run, but half the league has basically won about as many games as we have, or one more game. It's a really topsy-turvy, up and down. People are just beating everyone else type of league, and that is reflected in the fact that we won on Tuesday night and ended up in the relegation zone after that round of fixtures, but were 4 points off going into the top 10 basically. And yesterday I think we went up 4 places after getting a draw. 1 point was enough to lift us out of the relegation zone pretty comfortably. So, in terms of the table, I don't think the table means a lot at the moment. I don't think you can read a lot into our specific points total necessarily, but I think to the extent that you can, I think it's about where we deserve to be. I just don't buy this argument that we're sort of lucky, scrappy data busters who have an XG reckoning coming. I just don't see it, because on a game by game basis, the games where we've been hammered in XG, we have by and large actually been hammered, which is deserved, and we've deserved the wins that we've got. I think just quickly, Sam, to finish off, I agree with you. The next series of games is determinative, but that's because we started the season with a pretty poor run, and then we came back from an international break and had an amazing run, or at least a very good run for a team of our means, I would say, given how difficult those fixtures were as well. And we've come off that international break and had a pretty poor run, and we've got a pretty poor, less than a point a game is a pretty poor points return from it. So we have to come back off the next international break and prove that we can go on a good run again. This isn't sort of I don't think you really need data to explain this. I think it's just very much saying we had a bad run, a good run, and now we've had a quite bad run in terms of performances while salvaging some points. And we need to go on a good run again. And a good run involves good performances. I agree. If we continue to play poorly, then we'll probably lose more games than we'll win or draw, and that will put us in a very difficult position. But we have proven that we can play well, and I think we have the opportunity to now go and do that again on the other side of the international break.
Just very quickly, your retort to John.
Yeah, I think it's clear we're not disagreeing enormously, and I would agree that probably there's not that many games where the result hasn't matched up. But I do feel that overall, even if you did it, none of them are absolute shockers. We are a little bit lucky to get as many as 5 points from Preston, Pompey, and Derby. It could so easily have been 3 or even 4, if not quite as many as 5. And ultimately, yes, whilst we're talking about maybe only being 2 points or so less, that can make the difference when it's such a tightly congested league. And yeah, I agree with your point about poor phase followed by good phase followed by poor phase. That is why it is big. And my final counterpoint would be, whilst yes, we may not be massively data busters now, that is because we have played Preston, Derby and Pompey, who are all pretty poor sides this season. So my point is that if we keep playing as we are and then keep getting points, then we surely would be data busters, even if we're not now. Because if we play this badly against Watford, Norwich and Bristol City, then I think we're likely to get probably at most 1 point out of that 3. But if we play this badly and then somehow get 4 or 5 points out of that 3, then we would be becoming data busters, even if we're not at this present time. But look, it does coincide with key players being injured. I do like what Rooney's trying to do at times. Some of the attacking phases of play are good. Like, he's not a C or a C minus. That's still a pass grade at the moment. It's not a pass of merit or a pass of distinction, but it's still a pass grade. I like what he's trying to do much more than I like what Foster's trying to do. And yeah, as we've agreed, maybe not agreed for exactly the same reasons, the next 5 or 6 games will be really, really decisive in whether this is going to be a scrap to the death relegation season, or whether it's going to maybe even be a lower mid-table or maybe even middle of mid-table season.
And let's be fair, if you take a generic overview of the Sky Bet Championship table this season, it will show 3/4 of the league are going to be streaky across a 46 game season. And I've noticed already there is a lot of draws at this stage of the season. A lot of teams already have a lot of draws to their name. So, don't be surprised if it's a freak year where it takes a smaller number of points than you've ever seen before get automatic promotion. and it takes a ridiculous number to stay up where there's about 8 teams that are within 3 points of it. It could be one of those years where, you know, runs like that,
Well,
2
let's go
games there.
because if that is, then it would suggest the lower points tally is needed to stay up as well. If there's more draws, then that means 2 points are shared coming out of the game rather than 3. So that would suggest that statistically, if it's a season with a very high number of draws, then it would suggest that maybe it might be only 46, 47 needed to stay up rather than 51, 52, which would go in our favour. So let's hope you're right on that. It just seems to be at the minute there's a few who are pulling away. Leeds, Sheffield United, maybe Sunderland, although they're dropping off a little. I know they are still technically top, but Sheffield United have got the most points. They had 2 deducted. So there are a handful of teams pulling away. Maybe just 2, QPR and Pompey, getting cut adrift at the bottom. But then again, even Pompey won yesterday. So yeah, really interesting phase of the season coming up, not only for Argyle, but for the league in general, in terms of how that, because I think now we can now say definitively the table is starting to take shape. And
yeah, and
let's see.
I think if you look at how the table is at the moment, that as we mentioned at the very start of tonight's episode, an hour and 5 minutes ago, those 4 points may well end up being absolutely priceless that we've just taken out the last 2 games. Adam, just give us a wave just to make sure you are still here. It's been a little while since we.
I think one of those when
came,
as soon as you know it's John and Sam are going to aggressively agree, as we've just seen there, then I'm more than happy to go into my ornament in the corner phase. So, but it's always fun to
that's
watch.
fine. Let's take you out of that then. Let's go to the questions. We'll try and if we can keep these to a couple of minutes each.
Give them a bit of airtime.
Yeah, if we can keep these to a couple of minutes each, just because I'm wary that we don't want to keep people too late as we go into our hibernation for the international break. This isn't really a question, but I'm going to spin it to a question, Adam. It's from Melvin Young on YouTube for the audio listeners. And he says, touches in the box 6, Derby 38, says it all, attacking form has disappeared. Now, that's this game. The last couple of games I've noticed our touches in the opposition box have barely really even troubled the scorers. Is this something we need to worry about on a wider point than perhaps we're not getting in and around the opposition box as much as we'd like to?
It depends ultimately. We are a side who like to shoot from range more than most. So naturally, if we're going to be taking those shots rather than doing some tight interplay, then we're not going to be touching the ball in the box quite so often. So that explains some of it. I don't necessarily think our numbers are abysmal in that sense. I think there's just a few games where we see a huge difference. For those sorts of reasons. Leeds, I think, was the obvious example. I can't remember off the top of my head. They had at least 110 touches in our penalty area. It's the first 3 figures sum that I've seen in the Championship all season, and they smashed it. And we had a single figure. So there are games like that where the stats will play out in that way. But I don't think we needed me saying that to know that we were outplayed at Leeds. At the same time, there are games where those numbers will be a lot closer, or we may lead in those numbers.
I'll just throw into you very quickly, just for you to finish the point. Courtesy of FOTMob, Portsmouth at home on Tuesday night, 14 touches in Pompey's box. Is that more the statistic that worries us more than Leeds away, for example?
Yeah. So those are the sorts of games where those touches in the box are an example. There are a few where it will be a lot closer. There'll be a few where you don't see very many at all. And then I think it goes hand in hand, doesn't it, with the fact that our creation has been in low. I think that the touches in the box is a symptom of that rather than the cause of that, because we're a long range shooting team and you'll see low numbers. Am I worried about the fact that we haven't got many touches in the box in some games? Yeah, potentially, but I'm much more worried about 0 big chances. I'm much more worried about 0.1 XG that we may be making in these games, which I think tells us a great deal more. Now, whether that should be a cause of concern, whether that's something going forward that I should look at and go, this is a disaster, is very much going to link in with what the other 2 guys have said about the next few games. This is a run that is pivotal in a lot of ways. International break now, yes, but then there's not another break then until March. The fixtures we've got here, I think, we've run through certainly the next 6 and considered that points there could be make or break at very much this early stage. And if we're coming out of those, like say for example, if we have 10 touches in the penalty area against Oxford at home, that's not going to be good enough. And if it's part of a wider trend, then of course there's going to be issues there. But I think it's one of many, if you look at the data, that we're behind on, but can certainly be mitigated. And to link into the other point of data busting or where we are in terms of XG and things like that, a lot is made actually in the media of the fact that they say, oh, Plymouth Argyle, bottom of the XG table, top of the XG against table. What does that say? Well, it says that we haven't been playing particularly well, but it's also mitigated by the fact that our XG against figure has been massively inflated by those sorts of games that you see at Sheffield Wednesday, the sort that you see, the Cardiff QPR lead, that sort of thing. Expected points, which is a much more accurate reflection of where we are in terms of where we should be in the league without that certain number of XG, is we're certainly a lot closer. I'm not going to gloss over it. We're still bottom of the expected points table, but by nowhere near as much as the suggestion is from a lot in national media in terms of our XG. So yeah, there's a lot of data points there, and touched in the box, as was brought up in the comment, is certainly one of them that I think you can look at and in isolation say, well, that's not great. But when you've got stats that aren't great, your job as a coach is to improve them and make them better as you go on. If Rooney can do that in this run, then I won't be concerned. If we keep seeing that against teams where, with all due respect, we should be targeting as wins, then of course I'll be concerned. But I think that's probably going to go hand in hand with results anyway, and we'll have that conversation further down the line. So yeah, lots to chew out with the data. I won't go over all of it because I don't want to increase my reputation of being the most boring man alive. But yeah, I think that it's still early in many ways to read into some of those. And as much as I'm happy to, and the next run, for all sorts of reasons, will be telling.
I will come back to you very quickly, Adam. But John, just a quick one for you. I'll give it to you because I've got one especially saved up for Sam. Patrick Down, friend of the podcast, asks, did you remember how to celebrate an away goal?
Oh, yes. Lots of limbs
You made
all over the place.
You made up for it.
Even more ecstatic for having had to wait so bloody long, basically. But no, it was good. Good scenes and a great away end yesterday. Really sort of compact, full, noisy. Not always been the case this season. Obviously, our fans travel so far in terms of distance that I don't want to be critical even of some of the quieter games. But yesterday was a really good one, really good turnout. And if we were going to score in any game away from home, it was good. It was that one, just for the sort of release of energy and the noise we were able to make.
It certainly came across as loud, particularly that last sort of 5-10 minutes when it was just about trying to see it over the line on Argyle TV. There was plenty of noise coming from the 1900 in that away. And Adam, you've probably noticed as you were in the last little bit there that there's a little bit talk of Whittaker and what he needs to do. Obviously, we've all seen the clip from the football club on Tuesday night of him looking a little bit down, a little bit frustrated perhaps after the Portsmouth game. I don't want to go too much into this, obviously, because we don't know circumstances and things. I suspect it's more of his high standards and he was brought off in the game and perhaps he feels like he didn't influence it enough. When are we panic buttons, alarm bells ringing about Whittaker's performance, or is it just the fact that teams are now wise just to how influential he was last season and they're just marking him out of the game every week?
Much closer to the latter than the former, for me. I won't go too much into the clip on Tuesday for a couple of reasons. One, because as you quite rightly say, Joe, we don't know the exact circumstances and is not necessarily one to speculate on. But two, we had our body language expert on actually on Wednesday, Sam Down, who gave us a rundown on exactly what was going on.
It's really not caught up on the post-conference. Otherwise, we know we've covered it.
I was rotated. I'd throw my toys out of the pram. I wasn't needed, so
don't blame you. Don't blame you. But I've spoken about Whittaker before on this, as many have. I accept, as I think we all do, that his form isn't what it was at the start of last season. And I think the reason for that isn't because he somehow got lazier or he's somehow, not the player he once was. It's A, that the start of last season was a freak run of form that you're going to get sometimes, and he of course scored more than you'd expect him to. And B, teams have become wise to it, and teams have started to play. There were moments against Portsmouth where he got the ball out wide, and there were just three opposition players around him. That is what teams have been doing to Morgan Whittaker because they know the sort of threat that he can offer. I've created sound bites on this before, and I don't necessarily do it again, but comments that he's somehow lazy or doesn't get stuck in are absolutely ridiculous. He's he's the defensive actions. I think we've seen a lot of the time that he actually does get back. I don't know where people are getting the fact that he just stays up front and does nothing from. His numbers for defensive actions are surprisingly good for somebody that you expect to be forward very often. Let's not forget some of that will be instruction. If we're on the break, we want to get the ball to Morgan Whittaker and get him forward. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get why we're looking at a player who has worked wonders for us and just decided and plucked out of thin air that he's got an attitude problem and is lazy, quite frankly. Of course, he's not at the level of the start of last season, but that's generally because those are levels that are impossible for the vast majority of players to reach. He had that wonderful run of form, and it dipped for a variety of reasons, none of which are the fact that he decided he doesn't want to run. Now, some of the comments that we get, not necessarily in our comments, some you see on social media, about, oh, well, they'll be delighted there that he didn't accept the offer, or Burnley will be delighted that they didn't spend 12 million on him. And I have sympathy for the argument, because I think this is something that Sam and I have discussed before. There's a difference between wanting a player gone and wanting a player to sell for value. And there is an argument that we're not going to get that figure again. For as far as I can see, I think, well, that's the way you maybe want to do it when you're running a club. But if we don't get that 12 million offer again, I'm not going to lose any sleep. The alternative is that we keep Morgan Whittaker. We keep a player who, in many ways, is far too good for us. We keep a player who has delivered numbers before, and even in this game, he's completed more dribbles than anybody else, despite the fact that we've seen very little of the ball. His numbers going forward, whilst not being world beating, are fine. It's I'm again probably sounding very boring, having said this time and time again. There's some comments that I think are a little bit malicious, to be honest with you, at Whittaker, and trying to create an issue where there isn't one there. And yeah, if the worst case scenario is, oh no, we don't get an 8-figure fee and we have to keep Morgan Whittaker, fine by me.
He's also,
I actually noticed.
Just what I want to say, he's also a moments player, right? Like, even last season, at the beginning of last season, when he was on that unbelievable run of form, which I agree with Adam was unsustainable, he wasn't, unbelievable for every single minute of every single one of those games. Far from it. In fact, I remember quite a few games during that, first period of last season where he was pretty much totally anonymous. And then other games where he was more or less anonymous, but would then pop up and slam the ball into the bottom corner from 25 yards. And I do think he's not as good as he was then. I do think there's a confidence issue maybe with him. A couple of times yesterday that I noticed, and against Pompey as well, where he sort of got the ball into a position where last season he would just have let fly. This season he seems to be taking an extra touch or two, and defenders are closing him down better, but I think he's also giving them more of an opportunity to. So I'm not giving him a totally clean bill of health and saying he's playing unimprovably well and there aren't things he could improve on or whatever. But he was always a moments player, and this season his moments have got us 7 of our 16 points. 2 last-minute goals. Sorry, I should say 5, because I was misidentifying the Preston equaliser as a winner. But still, 5 out of 16 points is a lot for one person to basically single-handedly haul us to. A great last-minute winner against Blackburn. Preston equaliser, and then obviously that amazing goal at QPR, which was out of absolutely nowhere. He's still doing, he's still providing those moments. Less frequency maybe, but I'd be much more concerned if he wasn't popping up in those moments at all, as I think we did see, by the way, in stretches of the second half of last season where he was very anonymous and didn't have the moments. At the moment, I think it's kind of balance of, or somewhere in between the first and second halves of last season, right? Like he's not playing as well as in the first half, and there is a kind of visible confidence issue there. At the same time, the moments are still happening. He's still a threat. He's still, worth leaving on the pitch and having on the pitch the whole time, basically.
I would also say, feel free to call me absolute lunatic and what have you. And in fact, Jack's just brought it up now. Watching the game back this week from Sky's coverage from midweek, they brought up a statistic that I think last season Whittaker was averaging something like 17 seconds to get a shot away. This year, it's well in excess of 25 seconds, which either A, as John suggests, teams are just restricting him a lot more, or B, it comes down to a confidence issue. Who knows? But I noticed, particularly in the last two games. Go on.
I'm also a little bit skeptical of data points like that, just from a methodology point of view, because I have absolutely no idea how you're supposed to compare one batch of shots to another, because they all come from unique game situations, right? Like it's not an apples to apples comparison. So I'd be a little bit wary of that. But just the eye test would indicate that there is something in that, right? Like I think we're observing that he is not shooting as readily as he was. I just don't know if that particular actual way of measuring it holds any real water, but I'll defer back to you.
Yeah, call me a lunatic if you want, but the last two games in particular, I've noticed it was evident hugely on Tuesday night against Portsmouth that actually when Callum Wright came on and played in the middle of that attacking three behind the striker, I actually thought Morgan Whittaker looked a little bit more confident and a little bit more comfortable. He was getting on the ball a lot more. He was getting in better positions a lot more. And I think we saw that to an extent yesterday, really, that Callum Wright, Whittaker just looks a little bit more comfortable with Callum Wright there at the moment than he does Al Hadj, and that just comes with relationships and that grows over time. And perhaps in the first half on Tuesday night, Whittaker and Al Hadj were sort of treading on each other's toes a little bit. I thought Whittaker was having to come in a bit central, and they were sort of getting in each other's way, maybe. But who knows? I might be reading too much into that. We have two questions left. The next one is to just go round the group, nice and simple. I don't want a massive bit of hyperbole because we've been going now for 80 minutes. Yes or no's, and maybe a couple of lines each if you want. Sam, come to you first. Does Lewis Gibson walk back in the Watford game?
Yes, he's our best defender and has been since we came back up to the Championship. There we go. That was
John.
quick.
Well, if he's only capable of walking, probably not.
Adam.
Yeah, as soon as he's back to running speed, then we'll
quite
have him.
right.
As Sam said, he's our best defender.
Quite right. And Sam, this one's been kept especially for you off the back of your internet fame over the last 24 hours. 11th of April 2009.
So, in the proof I can multitask, I did read this question from Jack when I was having my earlier monologue, but didn't want to go off track and answer it. And I didn't know you were planning to start to ask me later. So I did actually DM Jack the answer on X, formerly Twitter.
Oh, unbelievable.
And Jack can comment if I'm cheating here, because he'll know I'm not cheating. I did know the answer straight away. It was a 4-0 home win against Coventry, where all 4 goals came in the first half. And the goal scorers were Barnes, Mackie, Judge, and Sipe. But if you want to hit another one off the cuff, just to absolutely prove I didn't Google it, by all means, fire ahead.
I don't have greens on screen open, so I can't pull out a random game. But if those of you who are watching that don't know anything that what we're talking about, check out the Argyle Life social media channel. Sam took on a bit of a challenge at Pride Park yesterday and did rather well for himself. John?
15th of October 2007. No, sorry, hang on. I didn't mean that. 15th of October 2006 is what I meant.
1-1 draw. 15th October 06. No, I don't think of 05. 15th October 06. That would be. Oh, crikey. I think it would have been in the midst of an international break. And I think the first game back after the international break would probably have been. Would it have been the 0-0 draw at home to Burnley on the 21st? No.
I gave you this one because this is one of my all-time favourite ever Argyle games that I've been to.
3-1 win over Derby. 3-1 win over Derby. 3-1 win over Derby. Yeah, the international break was a week before. 3-1 win over Derby, and it was 2 penalties from Watton. They scored a goal from. No, not coming to me, but it was a goal just before the stroke of half time that looked offside at the time, but watching it back, it wasn't offside.
Arsenal legend. Say again.
Napoli, was it? Was that his name or something like that? What was his name?
Lupoli, Arturo Lupoli. Streets will never forget.
Close enough. Anyway, it was a 3-1 home and over derby, 2 Watton penalties, and Marcel Sipe got the other one for us.
Was that game on the telly?
Think so, yeah. Early kickoff, I want to say.
I gave Sam that one because I saw someone in the comments earlier saying Watton took one of the worst penalties of all time at Derby away in 2005, I believe, which he did. Skied it over the bar. But he took 2 absolutely outstanding penalties in this game against Argyle at home. And one of which, like the goalkeeper, Derby at home. One of which the keeper basically looked like he was cowering as he knew what was coming, which was Watton caning it into the net.
I think.
Lee Grant.
Lee Grant.
Might have been Stephen Bywater in the cup game against them later that same season, which we also had 2 penalties, but only scored one of them that day. Kevin Gallen scoring one, Gallen stepping up and missing the other before Scott Sinclair with a headed goal secured the 2-0 win on the 17th of February 2007. Darren Moore sent off for Derby that day. And I think my earlier hesitation has been redeemed by the depth of my later knowledge. Comment from my dad saying, is that the game I nearly exploded that it was offside? Yes, it was. And then you got home and saw it wasn't offside.
If you don't know...
I seem to recall that day also some incredible theatrics from Plymouth Argyle's own Mark Edworthy, although I want to apologise if I've misidentified him.
He came for Derby around that time. I can't remember.
I believe he was caught and made a large meal of it in front of a baying corner of the Lyndhurst stand and Devonport end. But Mark, if you're watching and it wasn't you, I apologise, but I think it was. So I feel like
if anybody who's not seen my attempt, I do think I did quite well in my in-depth knowledge of games, but I'll be honest, I did get a couple of the dates slightly off, so I feel a bit of a fraud. We'll have another go at it at Norwich and see if I can get a 100% hit record on the dates.
Exactly. And do check out Argyle Life's TikTok and wherever else Aaron's posted it, because it's quite a watch, testing Sam's knowledge. Maybe one day we'll have to have an Argyle Life mastermind where we get somebody in the chair and we have our own edition of that. I don't know if we're doing a Watford preview, but quite frankly, we're only 90 minutes in and I can't be bothered. I presume Aaron will do something before the Watford game after the international break. However, it won't be on the Thursday, the day before the Watford game, because this is the last time you will all see us until perhaps a vlog comes out the next day of us all suited and booted in Tottenham Hotspur's finest restaurant-style lounge, wherever it is they can host it within the stadium. The next time that we're live will be Saturday, the 23rd of November, the day after the Watford game. Hopefully, Aaron or Sam will be clutching this really nice insert FCA trophy here after we've been voted the best podcast in the Football League. But who knows? But in advance of that...
win against Watford.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably take the win over Watford rather than winning at the FCAs, but who knows? Just a huge thanks in advance from me, because I haven't actually spoken about this since we've been nominated, because I was turfed off the podcast for a few weeks. But just a huge thanks to everybody who did vote for us. Hopefully, we will bring back a victory on the road this season as we all head to Tottenham Hotspur in, 11 days' time.
And obviously Spurs is proving a happy hunting ground for bad teams to get their first away win of the season. So looking positive on that front.
Very good. Always trying to antagonise as many fan bases as he can. Maybe that's the secret to our success if we get there. But yeah, look, if you have voted for us, a huge thank you. If you haven't voted for us, well, maybe there's next year you can vote for us if we get nominated again. But we really do appreciate the support and all the love you guys give us. That's it, basically. International break. I've no idea if Aaron's got any content planned to come out next weekend. I won't be in the United Kingdom. I will be in the United States. So if there is any content, I'm not around for it. But yeah, that's essentially it, lads. So enjoy your international breaks. And I will see all 3 of you in London in 11 days' time.
Look forward to it already.
Very exciting.
You should have lined up the clash to play us out there. I sense that
I should have. No, I haven't. That's 90 minutes up. I'm not adding on any time this evening. Gents, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you to well over 600 of you who tuned in live. If you have just joined us and you have missed the episode, you can catch it on all the various platforms that you see situated below Jon. And until the 23rd of November, when some of these lads will be back post Watford, we will see you again. Enjoy the international break. Enjoy getting frustrated at watching England one final time under an English manager for the next few years. We'll see you in a few weeks.